Welcome to your next lecture. This is a series of two presentations broadly titled ISplanning, or bringing the computer systems that you've talked about till now into your own organizations. Let's recap a bit. As we have talked about by now you've been introduced to basically all the different kinds of systems that exist in an organization. We started with this idea of database management system, which then transformed into transaction processing system, which allowed us to actually capture various transactions that existed in different departments in an organization. We got all of these transaction processing systems together into a single ERP system, which is a single database environment, and that became the overarching resource planning system for within an organization. We added on two big modules, the supply chain management and the CRM module, to help us capture things outside the organization and interact with stakeholders outside the organization. On the other hand, what we started doing is we realized that all of this data can be used to actually take decisions inside an organization, and we talked about business intelligence systems. Okay. Data warehousing and business intelligence system, how data from all of these applications needs to come into a data warehouse, and then you can run business intelligence softwares like business objects on top of it. We also talked about workflow systems like leave management systems, and the future in terms of business process management system, which allows us to capture all of the above mentioned systems and put business rules and orchestrate a new system out, orchestrate new kind of information system out there in an environment. Now what we need to do is we need to start talking about about how do we bring all of these different technologies into an organization that exists, or change the existing organization to accommodate these different applications. So we start by looking at ISplanning. Okay, first let us understand where planning actually exists. ISplanning is a smaller component within the business planning environment. Okay, business supersedes business goals are very important. All IS planning has to either be derived from business goals or inform business goals. So business goals, business planning is very, very important. Inside IS planning, we do project planning. This IS systems, information systems, can be broken down into many smaller projects, and we will be talking about selection of those projects as a part of the project planning mechanism. A very important thing that has started emerging recently is this idea of architecture. Think about architecture as a building architecture. Once you have designed a building, it limits or allows you to do certain things that were not possible earlier. Similar situation now exists with today's architecture. Earlier, life was simpler. When we had different transaction processing systems that didn't need to talk to each other, life was simple. Everybody could go on their own, go out and do their own thing, and it really didn't matter. Now, these systems need to interact with each other. Okay, and it is that interaction that needs to be based on a pre-specified architecture. So you need to start getting involved in this idea of thinking about it as a building architecture or an IS architecture. Again, the important thing here is I'm not asking you to get into the very specifics of the architecture. However, you need to be cognizant of the fact that architecture will limit or may help you succeed in the future. Okay, just like any other system, any other planning mechanism, we do three kinds of things in an information systems planning. The previous slide defined them. I'm just going to compare them to business planning. When you're talking about assessment of a planning, you talk about assessment of a business. Here, in an information technology world, we talk about assessment of the information use and management of that information. Again, never ever talk about whether the technology succeeds or not. The key part in information technology is information and not technology. Okay, think of the vision, mission, and values are the important thing in terms of business. Here we are talking about the vision of future and how technology is going to evolve in the future, and the basic architecture that you're going to lay down to accommodate all of that architecture. Planning is similar. In both cases, we are talking both strategic and operational plans. You know the definitions of these from your earlier classes. What has happened over a period of time is the fact that the traditional view of IS has changed. Okay, let me compare what is happening right now versus what we used to think about information systems earlier. Now we think about information systems in a strategic alignment perspective. Okay, where we are trying to strategically align information systems, a very, very important and pervasive component of an organization, into the overall organization. Earlier, we used to think only in terms of internal organization, internal focus. This was the world of transaction processing systems and ERP systems. Okay, and this is how we started the course also. Now, you need to start thinking beyond that in terms of supply chain management and CRM systems. So, information system is not replacing the old transaction processing systems or ERP vision. The things have now gotten added into it. We are looking at not only inside the organization, but also outside the organization. We'll talk about alignment perspectives in a minute. IS executive roles, it used to be a line role. Now, now most organizations have a CIO position who sits in a board, who actually does the things that board members do. They inform strategy, they come out of strategy, they are important people inside the board. Earlier, we used to do only cost and service consideration, whether IS is cost effective or not. Now there are multiple criteria, as you will see in a minute. Let me go back to this idea of alignment. There are 4 dominant perspectives regarding alignment. Alignment is the idea that information systems and the rest of the business are trying to achieve the same goal. There's a researcher who did a study on Fortune 500 companies regarding their alignment, and it was a factor of 2 that he found, that companies that are properly aligned in terms of information systems and technology and business can double their profits. Okay, so it has a significant impact. So let's talk about the 4 dominant perspectives regarding alignment. The first one is called the strategy execution alignment perspective. This is the traditional perspective. This is the perspective that most manufacturing organizations used to hold, and some are still holding. Here we start with the business strategy. The organization infrastructure is built around it, and to support that organization infrastructure, we built an IS infrastructure. UNF is a classical example of this perspective. Here, the driver is the business strategy, and we evaluate information systems based on the cost and service, whether it's cost effective or not, basically. Okay, and as I said, this is the traditional perspective. Okay, now let's look at some new perspectives that have emerged with technology. The first one is called technology transformation alignment perspective. Here, business and IT work together to transform the business into a new kind of an organization. The driver here is still the business strategy. I'll give you an example of the company I was working for. We were a traditional brick and mortar company. Okay, and we wanted to transform ourselves into what is now called as a click and mortar company, where a lot of things would go online. That's when IT and business combined. Okay, we found out what were the important barriers and what happened, and the idea was to attain technology leadership in our category. Okay, and we always wanted to be one step further, because the business processes that were based on the technology gave us a superior competitive advantage. Okay, so a lot of organizations have helped themselves transform like this. In terms of new organization, I would say Amazon is an example of such a perspective. The next one is called the competitive potential alignment perspective. Here you are taking a competitive IT potential. Think about Google search. Okay. Here, Google has come up with this new way of doing search, okay, and it made a business model around it. So the IT strategy, the ability to constantly keep good search, that's the basic goal, and that then drives a business strategy around it, and we build an organization infrastructure around it. The outcome here is Google needs to stay one step ahead and one step in terms of market share, one step ahead of everybody else, and Google does that. Now it's interesting to note that when business strategy is the driver, technology leadership is the performance criteria for IS, and when IT is the main strategy, it has to deliver on business. Okay. The final perspective is called the service alignment perspective. In this case, start thinking in terms of our infrastructure providers. For example, the ISPs, the telephone companies. They don't really have a business strategy. They're there, they're doing well. It's a monopoly environment. They have an IT strategy as to what kinds of cables to lay down. They lay down those cables, and they have an organizational infrastructure to support all of that. Key thing, they are focused on customer satisfaction. The people are not going to switch from Comcast to any other internet service provider unless they're not satisfied with it. So your key performance criteria is that internet should work all the time or whenever it is expected to work. Okay, so that's why a lot of these companies spend a lot of their money trying to achieve customer satisfaction. So again, these are the 4 alignment perspectives that are out there. Why do I educate you in this regard? The reason is simple. When you go into an organization, having been exposed to so many different technologies, you will find that some of these technologies work and some don't. And some you want to introduce, some you don't want to introduce in your organization. But unless you realize what alignment perspective your organization has, you are not going to understand what are the key drivers and key performance indicators for your initiative. Okay, and let me reemphasize this, that you will have to come up with initiatives. You are an MBA, you are hired for that perspective. Okay, so but understand what alignment perspective your organization has. And if the alignment perspective is incorrect according to you, focus on changing the alignment perspective first before starting on to a new project. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult to. Next, let us try and understand exactly how the process of information systems development happens. We'll go into the details in a minute, but your textbook divides it into 5 different steps. The idea of business requirements collection, architectural process requirements, then actually designing the architecture, the functional specs, and the hardware, software, etc. Data and interface. If you really think about it, and this is very important, if you think about it, what of these steps would you think you are involved in? You're definitely involved as a business professional in business requirements analysis. Who better than you would know what the requirements are? You need to understand what the business processes are. Functional specs would also be under your area. And last but not the least, architecture. What we have found is architecture itself can be a limiting or enhancing factor in the future. Okay, so yes, you're not going to get into the details of an architecture, but you need to know enough about an architecture to know whether it'll work for you in the future or not. And so if you really think about it, you're involved in 3.5 of the 5 steps in here. This is pretty much dominated by IT. And if you don't get involved, and you think that this is an IT issue, all of the business process issues, all of the issues that come up are going to then put you into trouble. So I encourage you to really think about it and then get involved. The next thing that we have to understand is the techniques by which projects get evaluated, okay, or emerge. Okay, there are basically 5 methods. Okay, 3 of them are very common: the payback method, the net PV, NPV, and return on investment. These you would have learned in your finance classes also. There is also a method called informal back of the envelope method. This is primarily what happens when executives are sitting across and they listen about a new technology or a new way of doing things, and it's a low cost system, and you just go ahead because you find that it eliminates costs or benefits informally. There is a benefit that you see out there. Yes, there's a benefit to using Groove, maybe. Not a whole lot of cost of implementation, but there's a benefit to it. Microsoft came up with another method called the total cost of ownership. Okay. Microsoft came up with another concept called the total cost of ownership. This is a concept that you will find on used in auto sales also. What is your total cost of ownership over 5 years? Okay, rather than just looking at input cost and implementation cost, you look at cost over 5 years, and this is what Microsoft says is lower for most of its products because the lifetime cost, okay, is cheaper. Okay. Other managerial considerations that go into IS development, other than the finance, is existing architecture. Does your existing architecture support something? For example, at UNF, we are a Microsoft architecture-based company. So anything that we do, we try to actually adopt it with respect to the Microsoft architecture. You'll also have to distinguish between current and future requirements. Understand the distinction here. When you go out and you ask somebody regarding what should be done, there is some things that need to be done right now, and then there are things that you need to prod them about the future. Most of the time when you ask people regarding systems, they are more inclined to answer you regarding current functions, because that's where they're facing their hurdles. But information systems are not designed for current environment. They are designed to continue to prosper in the future. And you need to get to those future requirements. Okay. Also, technology will advance, so keep your minds open. In this class, I've taken an approach where I've given you the macro trends rather than specific applications, and these should serve you well when making a decision regarding what is going on in the future. Finance issues we talked about. There might be other technical issues that your IT team will bring up to you. All of these projects, all of these things, IS developments are handled under under the umbrella of project management. Project management is not isolated to information systems, but it is a tool that's used across a lot of disciplines. However, since a lot of projects are done in IT has done a lot of work in project management as a discipline. So what is project management? Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, techniques to project activities in order to meet or exceed stakeholder expectations. Okay, it is about trade-offs. It is about trade-off between the scope, between cost and time. What it essentially says is you'll have to manage the three in tandem as a project manager. Okay, if the scope increases, so does the cost and maybe time, and there's trade-off in each one of these things. Project management goes through 4 different cycles: defining, planning, executing, and delivering. Okay, and you can if you take the project management course at UNF, you'll find details regarding each one of these sections in there. I also want to emphasize that project management, while the average pay increase in for a project management PMI certified professional is around $10,000 a year, project management is not for everybody. Okay, project management is about managing multiple stakeholders, as you can see in the slide, without actually having a whole lot of authority. By the way, PMI stands for Project Management Institute. It is an institute that's been growing leaps and bounds. It certifies whether you have the skills and the tools, knowledge of the tools and techniques to actually manage projects. And again, it's a great place to go. This slide just shows you the Gantt chart. This is one of the in Microsoft Project. I just wanted to show how projects get broken down and what are the tools, major tools and techniques that you use. One of the tools is Microsoft Project. It allows you to break things into various tasks and shows how they are linked with each other. And then you can actually do analysis on what tasks need to be done when, etc., etc. You can even track assignments and things like that. Okay. Some big issues with respect to IT in terms of managing project risk and making sure the project actually gets completed. First one is project complexity, the extent to which the various tasks in a project get interlinked. The more project is interlinked with each other, the more complex it gets. Okay, simpler projects are simpler to do because there's no cohabitation, no interlinking between tasks. Clarity, the ability to define requirements of a system. Most projects need to be defined very clearly. You get what you define, and these projects need to be defined very clearly. The clearer it is defined, the better it is. And finally, the size. Big projects seem to be riskier than the smaller ones. For example, the Boston Big Dig. It's what, 6 times over budget and still leaks. And it's just an amazing thing. It's a big project and it was complex, and the size got too much, and things like that. ERP implementations are also considered as big projects. So what you will find in most companies is that we break down the ERP project into multiple modules. Okay, no module should be more than 6 months, and then you take a rest, you take a breather, you assess what is going on. Things take time in an implementation, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about implementation. Measuring project success. Ultimately, you'll have to measure how a project actually succeeds. According to research, there are 4 dimensions of project success. The resource constraints. Does the project meet the time and budget cost criteria? Impact on customers. Business success. And then how much does it help you prepare for the future? However, it is said so that any project that meets its time and budget criteria but does not address business success is a failed project. Okay, so business success is the most important thing in any project. Okay, so if you put it all together in one slide, what you will see is this is the model for project management. It's called the contingency model for project management. We talked about the various project characteristics. We talked about the project management techniques. We talked about outcomes. And one thing that you will notice that that becomes very important is the individual attributes. And we talked about collaboration. It's the same attributes that we talked about in the collaboration slides that come here, except for experience, where it seems like the more experience you have regarding a particular discipline, the better you tend to perform. Okay. Next, we are going to talk about systems analysis and design. We are going to take a project and then break it down further and see exactly what IS techniques, IS development methods should be implemented. I'll do that as a part of the next module. Thank you.